shapes. Tall, armed, green, orcs. His first instinct was the same one every human had when faced with orcs at their door: run. His second instinct, the one that came a heartbeat later, was, where exactly would he run to in the middle of a storm that was trying to murder the landscape? So he did the only thing that made sense, which was also the stupidest thing possible. He opened the door. The wind hit him first, nearly ripping the door from his hands. Then the rain, cold and sharp as thrown daggers. And then he saw them properly. 4 orc women, fully armed and armored, standing in his doorway like judgment had arrived, wearing leather and carrying axes. The one in front, tallest, oldest, with a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, stared at him with the kind of eyes that had seen things Rupert couldn't imagine and didn't want to. Her hand rested on the pommel of a sword that looked like it had ended more arguments than it had lost. "We need shelter," she said, not asking, stating a fact. The storm. Rupert looked at her, then at the 3 warriors behind her, then at the storm that was currently trying to dismantle reality, then back at her. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The lead warrior's eyes narrowed, like she'd expected an argument, and didn't know what to do with compliance. "You're letting us in? Just like that? Storm's trying to kill you," Rupert said, raising his voice over the wind. "I'm not about to help it." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. But she nodded once and stepped inside. The other 3 followed, bringing with them the smell of rain, leather, steel, and something else. Something that smelled like battlefields and long roads and places Rupert had never been. He shut the door, and suddenly his small cabin felt impossibly smaller. 4 orc warriors, armed and dripping, stood in his main room, taking up space the way mountains take up horizons. They were shorter than he expected, roughly his height, maybe an inch or 2 different in either direction. But they had the kind of presence that made you forget about measurements and focus on the fact that they could probably break you in half without trying hard. "I'll get more wood for the fire," Rupert said, because he needed something to do with his hands that wasn't shaking. "And towels. I have towels." The lead warrior watched him with those battlefield eyes. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Rupert corrected, pulling blankets from a chest. "But you needed shelter, and I have a roof." Seems simple enough. One of the warriors, the youngest-looking one, with her black hair and intricate braids, snorted softly. "Simple. He says it's simple." "Necra," the leader said quietly. Just the name, but it carried weight. The young warrior fell silent. Rupert handed out towels and blankets, trying not to think about the fact that any one of these women could probably snap him like a twig. They accepted the offerings with nods, wiping rain from their faces and armor. That's when he noticed the way one of them, not the leader, the one with the red war paint across her cheekbones, was staring at him. Not the way the others were looking, which was the cautious assessment warriors gave potential threats. This was different, more intense, like she was trying to solve a problem written on his face. "There's stew," Rupert said, gesturing to the pot. "Not much, but it's hot." The leader raised an eyebrow. "You feed us too? You're in my home during a storm that sounds like it's trying to punch holes in the sky." "Yes, I feed you." He paused. That's what you do." The 4th warrior, the one who'd been murmuring numbers under her breath since entering, spoke up. "Dulgra calculates you have approximately 1 bowl per person, given pot size, which means you go without if you feed us all." Rupert looked at her, Dulgra apparently, then shrugged. "I'll eat tomorrow. Storm won't last forever." Silence fell, broken only by rain hammering the roof like it had a personal grudge against shelter. "Thraka," the warrior with red paint finally spoke, addressing the leader. Her voice had weight to it, like words being pulled from a deep well. "He doesn't recognize me." The leader, Thraka, glanced at her, then back at Rupert. "Should he?" The warrior stepped forward, into the better light of the fire. She reached up slowly, giving Rupert time to see it wasn't a threat, and pushed aside the leather strap across her shoulder. Beneath it, visible through a tear in her shirt, was a scar. A nasty one, puckered and old, running along her ribs. The kind of scar that said, "You almost died here." 5 years ago, she said quietly. "The border skirmish near Thornwood. You found me bleeding in a ditch." Rupert stared at the scar, then at her face, and slowly, like fog lifting, he remembered. Not the face. He'd barely seen her face. She'd been covered in mud and blood and rain, not so different from tonight's storm. But he remembered the wound, remembered thinking no one survived that kind of bleeding, remembered tearing his own shirt to make bandages, using the linen cloth to pack the wound, dragging her under an overturned cart for shelter, while soldiers from both sides searched for survivors to kill. You, he breathed. You lived. Because of you. The warrior's hand moved to her chest, pressed against the armor over her heart. You gave me shelter. Bandaged wounds. Didn't ask if I was enemy. Didn't ask for payment. Didn't ask for name. You were dying, Rupert said simply. Seemed rude to ask questions. The young one, Necra, made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something else entirely. The warrior with the scar didn't look away from Rupert. In Orc culture, she said slowly, life debt is sacred, more than gold, more than steel, more than blood oath. She paused. My name is Moksha Ironfang, and I have carried your debt for 5 years. Thraka's hand had moved to her sword, not threatening, but ready. Dolgra had stopped murmuring numbers. Necra had straightened, suddenly very interested. The air in the cabin felt thicker, heavier, like the storm had somehow gotten inside. I didn't save you for debt, Rupert said quietly. I saved you because it was right. I know. Moksha's voice was steady, but something in her eyes wasn't, which makes the debt even greater. Because you gave without asking, expected nothing, wanted nothing. She reached inside her armor, and every instinct Rupert had screamed weapon. But what she pulled out wasn't steel, it was cloth. Old, worn, stained with something dark that had turned brownish-green with age. His linen cloth, the one he'd used to save her life. I kept this, she said. I carried it for 5 years. Every battle, every march, every night. Reminder of debt unpaid. The storm raged outside. Inside, silence. Moksha looked at her sisters, then back at Rupert. And when she spoke next, her voice carried through the cabin like a bell, clear and undeniable. He is mine. Necra's eyes went wide. Dolgra stopped breathing mid-calculation. Thraka's hand tightened on her sword, but not in threat. In shock. Moksha, Thraka said carefully. You know what you're saying. I know what I'm saying. Rupert looked between them, understanding nothing except that something significant had just happened, and he was at the center of it without knowing the rules. I'm sorry, I don't understand. What does that mean? It was Dolgra who answered, her voice thoughtful. In Orc culture, life debt can be paid many ways. Gold, service, blood. She paused. Or claim. Claim, Rupert repeated. She's claiming you, Necra said, and there was something in her tone that might have been awe, or might have been concern. As hers, under Orc law, witnessed by sisters, that's a bond. She looked at Moksha. Sister, are you certain? Because you can't take that back. Moksha didn't look away from Rupert. I'm certain. I've been certain for 5 years. Just didn't know it until I saw his face again. Moksha, Thraka's voice was gentle but firm. He's human. He lives in a cabin with 3 chickens and furniture held together by hope. He doesn't understand our ways. Doesn't know what claiming means. Then I'll teach him. Moksha took a step closer to Rupert, and he felt the intensity of her presence like heat from a forge. You saved my life without wanting anything. I'm giving you everything. That's how life debt works when the debt becomes something else. Something else, Rupert echoed faintly. She loves you, you absolute fool, Necra said, exasperated. She's been carrying your bloody cloth against her heart for 5 years, talking about the human who showed kindness when the world showed steel. We all knew. We just thought she'd, move on. Get over it. Not declare a formal claim in front of witnesses the moment she saw your face again. Moksha's jaw tightened. Necra. What? I'm helping. He looks confused. I am confused, Rupert admitted. The room was spinning slightly and not from the storm. You're saying, what exactly are you saying? Moksha held up the cloth, stained with her blood and his kindness. I'm saying you saved my life. I'm saying I've thought about you every day for 5 years. I'm saying that debt became something deeper when I wasn't looking. And I'm saying that in Orc culture, when a warrior claims someone, witnessed by their sisters, it's binding. She paused. If they accept. If I accept, Rupert repeated. If you accept. The storm hammered the roof. The fire crackled. 4 Orc warriors stood in his cabin, waiting for his answer to a question he didn't fully understand. I don't have anything, Rupert said quietly. I'm a poor farmer. I have this cabin, 3 chickens, a goat that hates everyone, and a field that barely feeds me. I don't know your culture, don't know your ways, don't know what claiming even means, really. It means, Moksha said, and her voice was softer now, that you're mine to protect, mine to provide for, mine to stand beside. It means I've chosen you, and I won't unchoose you. It means, she hesitated, and for the first time he saw vulnerability in her eyes. It means I'm asking if you'll have me, even though I'm orc, even though I'm warrior, even though this makes no sense to your world or mine. Rupert looked at her, really looked, at the scar he'd given her by refusing to let her die, at the cloth she'd carried for 5 years, at the way she stood like she was ready to fight the world but terrified of his answer. Why me? He asked. I'm nobody, just a farmer who did what anyone should do. That's why, Moksha said simply, because you think kindness is what anyone should do, when most people wouldn't cross a road to help an enemy, because you opened your door tonight without hesitation, because you offered food you can't spare to warriors who could take it by force, because you're good, Rupert Holloway, and goodness is rarer than any treasure. His name. She knew his name. He didn't remember telling her, but she'd learned it somehow, kept it like she'd kept the cloth. I'm scared, Rupert said honestly. So am I, Moksha replied. I don't know what I'm agreeing to. Neither do I, really. This has never happened before. Thraka cleared her throat. Actually, there was that one time in not helping Thraka, Moksha said without looking away from Rupert. The storm raged, the cabin held, and Rupert Holloway, poor farmer with 3 chickens and a stubborn goat, looked at the orc warrior who'd carried a piece of his kindness against her heart for 5 years and said the only thing that made sense, which was also probably the stupidest thing possible. Yes, the word hung in the air like a bell's echo. Moksha's eyes widened. Yes? Yes, I accept. Whatever claiming means, whatever this is, yes. Because you carried that cloth for 5 years, and that means something. Because you're standing here terrified, I'll say no, and that means something. Because, he smiled, small and uncertain. Because maybe I'm tired of being alone in a cabin with 3 chickens, and maybe you're the least alone I've felt in a very long time. Nekra whooped. Dolgra murmured something that sounded like probability of success, higher than calculated. Thraka shook her head but smiled, and Moksha pressed the blood-stained cloth to her heart and smiled like sunrise. There are rituals, she said, traditions, things that should be done properly. Do them later, Rupert said. Right now there's stew getting cold, a storm trying to break my roof, and 4 warriors who need feeding. He paused. 5 people who need feeding. Moksha caught the change, from 4 to 5, from them to us. 5, she agreed softly. They ate stew that was more water than substance, sat around a fire that barely heated the cabin, listened to a storm that screamed its fury at the world. Thraka told stories of battles. Nekra showed off her collection of stones, explaining which came from which fight. Dolgra calculated the exact probability of the roof collapsing. 17%, she announced, which wasn't as comforting as she seemed to think. And Moksha sat beside Rupert, close enough that their shoulders touched, the blood-stained cloth now tied around her wrist where everyone could see it. What happens now? Rupert asked quietly, while the others debated whether Nekra's stone from the Battle of 3 Bridges was actually from that battle or from a river. Now, Moksha said, we figure it out, together. She looked at him, and in the firelight, her eyes were warm. Fair warning, orc courtship is complicated. Lots of rituals, tests, challenges. My clan will want to meet you, test you. Make sure you're worthy. Am I worthy? Rupert asked. You're the human who saved my life without asking for anything, who opened his door in a storm, who shared his last meal with strangers who could have been enemies. Moksha smiled. You're the worthiest person I know, but my clan won't care about that until they test you themselves. It's tradition. What kind of tests? Strength, endurance, wisdom, ability to provide. She paused. Also, there's usually a drinking contest, but we can probably skip that one. I can't win a drinking contest against orcs. Nobody can. That's why we can skip it. Rupert laughed, surprising himself. This is insane. Completely, Moksha agreed. But insanity witnessed by sisters and accepted by both parties is binding. So, She held out her hand. Are you ready to be insane with me? Rupert looked at her hand. Calloused, scarred, strong enough to break steel and gentle enough to cradle hope. He took it. Ready, he said. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cabin, something new was beginning. Something that made no sense to human culture or orc tradition. Something that happened when a life debt became something deeper. When kindness got repaid in the only way that mattered. When a poor farmer with nothing to his name became the most important thing in a warrior's world. The storm eventually passed, like all storms do. Dawn came cold and clear, painting the world in shades of beginning again. Moksha stood at the door with her sisters preparing to leave, but her hand stayed in Rupert's. I'll come back, she promised, with my clan, to do this properly, to make this real in the eyes of our people. She paused. Will you wait? Rupert looked at his cabin, his field, his 3 chickens and stubborn goat, his life of quiet poverty and simple routines. Then he looked at Moksha, warrior who carried a blood-stained cloth like a treasure, who claimed him with the same certainty she wielded her blade. I'll wait, he said. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on how fast my clan can march. She squeezed his hand. And Rupert, when they come, when they test you, don't try to be warrior. Don't try to be orc. Just be who you are. The human who saved an enemy and didn't ask for thanks. That's the person I claimed. That's the person I want. She kissed his hand, a gesture that made Necra whistle and Thraka groan, and then they were gone. 4 warriors walking into the morning like legends returning to their proper stories. Rupert stood in his doorway long after they disappeared. His hand still tingled where Moksha had kissed it. His heart still pounded like he'd survived something dangerous and wonderful. His future had just become something he couldn't predict and couldn't control. 3 weeks later they came. Not just Moksha and her 3 sisters, the entire clan. 200 orcs marching up to his cabin with banners flying and drums beating. Rupert stood in his doorway, absolutely terrified, watching an army approach because a woman had decided he was worth claiming. Moksha rode at the front, beside a massive orc who could only be the chief. She'd told Rupert about him in their brief time together. Her father, the war leader, the one who would test him hardest. When they stopped, the chief dismounted and walked forward, and Rupert tried very hard not to look like he was about to faint. You're the human, the chief said. Not a question. I'm Rupert Holloway, sir. Sir. The chief smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. My daughter claims you, says you saved her life, says you're worthy. He looked Rupert up and down, taking in the patched clothes, the worn boots, the cabin that was barely standing. I see a poor farmer with nothing. That's what I am, Rupert said honestly. Then why? The chief asked. Should I allow this claim? Rupert thought about lying, about exaggerating, about trying to be something he wasn't. Then he remembered Moksha's words. Just be who you are. You shouldn't, Rupert said. By every logical measurement, I'm a terrible choice. I'm poor. I'm human. I don't know your culture or your ways. I can't win in combat or tests of strength. I can't provide riches or status. He paused. But I can promise this. I'll never ask her to be less than she is. I'll never stop being amazed that she chose me. And I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of the faith she showed when she carried my blood-stained cloth for 5 years. Silence. The entire clan waited. The chief stared at Rupert for a long moment. Then he turned to Moksha. Daughter, this is your final chance. Choose differently. Choose warrior. Choose wealth. Choose someone who makes sense. Moksha looked at her father, then at Rupert, then back at her father. I choose the human who saved me without knowing my name. I choose the farmer who shared his last meal with strangers. I choose the man who said yes even though he was terrified. I choose him, Father, today and always. The chief sighed. You've inherited my stubbornness. He looked at Rupert. There will be tests, challenges, hardships. My people will judge you every day. Some will never accept you. This will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, Rupert said. The chief snorted. Then slowly he smiled. Welcome to the clan, Rupert Holloway. Try not to die during the tests. The ceremony that followed was nothing like human weddings. There was ritual combat. Rupert lost spectacularly, but earned respect for not giving up. There was a test of wisdom. Rupert somehow passed by, pointing out that the riddle had 2 answers, not 1. There was feasting and dancing and drinking contests. Rupert wisely sat those out. And at the end, As the sun set over a field that had never seen such celebration, Moksha took Rupert's hand and led him to the center of the clan. In Orc tradition, she announced, claim is completed with gift exchange. I give you my life blade. She presented a dagger, worn and well used. I give you my clan name. I give you my protection, my strength, my loyalty. She paused. And I give you my heart, which you've carried unknowingly for 5 years. Rupert looked at the gifts, at the clan watching, at Moksha, waiting. I don't have a blade, he said quietly. Don't have a clan name. Don't have strength or riches or anything worth giving. Then what do you give? Someone called from the crowd. Rupert reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved figure. A chicken, crude and simple, whittled over long winter nights when he had nothing else to do. I give you this, he said, holding it out to Moksha. I carved it last winter. It's not valuable, it's not impressive, but it's made from a tree that grows on my land, shaped with my hands, and it's honest. He paused. I give you my home, such as it is. My land, small as it is. My life, simple as it is. And my heart, which stopped being mine the moment you said he is mine, and made me believe I could be someone worth choosing. Moksha took the carved chicken, cradling it like it was made of gold. It's perfect, she whispered. It's a wooden chicken, Rupert said. It's perfect, she repeated. Then she kissed him, right there in front of her entire clan, and the cheering could probably be heard 3 villages over. They didn't live happily ever after. Not perfectly, not easily. Rupert struggled with Orc traditions he didn't understand. Moksha struggled with human customs that made no sense to her. The clan took years to fully accept him. Other humans thought he'd betrayed his kind. They faced prejudice from both worlds, judgment from all sides. But they had each other, and a small cabin that became a meeting ground between 2 cultures, and 3 chickens that Moksha insisted on naming after famous warriors, and a wooden chicken carving that sat on the mantel like a treasure, and a blood-stained cloth that Moksha still carried, now tied around their joined hands during quiet moments when the world felt too heavy. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Rupert would tell them about a storm, about 4 warriors at his door, about a cloth stained with blood and kindness. And Moksha would add the part he always left out, that he'd said yes, when yes made no sense, when yes was terrifying, when yes was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. So you claimed father because he saved your life? Their daughter would ask. No, Moksha would say, looking at Rupert with eyes that still carried sunrise. I claimed him because he made me believe that saving an enemy was just what anyone should do. And if that's just what anyone should do, then maybe the world didn't have to be divided into green and not green. Maybe there was another way. She paused. He gave me more than life that day. He gave me hope that the world could be different. And what did Mother give you, Father? Their son would ask. Rupert would look at his family, at the cabin that had become a home, at the children who were proof that different worlds could make something beautiful, at the life he never expected but couldn't imagine without. Everything, he'd say simply. She gave me everything. The wooden chicken still sat on the mantel. The blood-stained cloth still hung above their bed. And on stormy nights, when rain hammered the roof and wind tried to break their walls, Rupert and Moksha would hold hands and remember the night when a storm brought them together, when a life debt became love, when a claim became choice, when a poor farmer with nothing and a warrior with everything met in the middle and discovered they both had exactly what the other needed. In the end, the story wasn't about orcs or humans, wasn't about cultural differences or impossible love. It was about 2 people who looked at each other across a vast divide and decided that the only thing that really mattered was the bridge they could build together. One blood-stained cloth at a time, one carved chicken at a time, one yes at a time. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Moksha would whisper the words that changed everything. He is mine. And Rupert would whisper back, and I always will be, because some claims are forever, some debts are paid in love, and some storms bring exactly what you need, even when you didn't know you needed it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of that blood-stained cloth or the power of choosing love across impossible divides, please hit that like button and subscribe to the Orcbound Tales channel for more stories that break boundaries and touch hearts. Share this with someone who believes in love that transcends worlds, and drop a comment telling us, What would you do if warriors appeared at your door during a storm? Next time, we explore what happens when the prejudice against their union turns deadly, and Moksha must choose between her clan and the human she claimed. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the bravest thing you can do is say yes when yes makes no sense. Because sometimes nonsense is exactly what changes everything.
The medical bay doors hissed open, and Arya Ven stepped through with her arms wrapped in white synth bandages from wrist to elbow. The sterile smell of regeneration gel clung to her like a second skin, barely masking the copper tang of blood beneath. She'd hoped to slip through the hab wing unnoticed, to reach her quarters and collapse onto her bunk before anyone saw her like this. But the universe, as always, had other plans. Kiro hit her at knee height. The Velakir cub, all rust-colored fur and oversized ears, slammed into her legs with enough force to make her stumble. His triangular snout immediately pressed against her bandaged forearm, nostrils flaring as he drew in deep, shuddering breaths. The growl that emanated from his small chest was anything but childlike. "Kiro, buddy, I'm fine," Arya began. But the words died as 4 more cubs rounded the corner at a dead sprint. They swarmed her like a pack of miniature wolves, though the Velakir resembled no earth animal she could name. 6-legged, fox-faced, with bioluminescent patterns along their spines that now pulsed angry crimson. They pressed against her legs and circled her boots. Every single one was sniffing, scenting, cataloging the damage she'd tried to hide. Kiro's growl deepened. His crest, the fan of crystalline spines that would someday mark him as a warrior, flared outward in a display of pure rage. "Chemical burns," he snarled in his people's clicking language, which the translator in Arya's ear rendered as accusatory and sharp. "Acid. Kethrian. Acid. Damn." The cubs were too smart for their own good. "It was an accident," Arya said calmly, dropping to one knee so she was at their eye level. 5 pairs of golden, slit-pupilled eyes fixed on her, with an intensity that would have been adorable if it weren't so unsettling. "The cargo bay had a leak in one of the chemical storage containers. I sealed it before anyone else got hurt." "You sealed it with your hands?" Kiro's voice cracked with disbelief and fury. His smaller siblings chittered behind him, their bioluminescence shifting to distressed yellows and oranges. "I had gloves on, gloves that melted." This from Sarah, the smallest cub, whose voice trembled. She pressed her face against Arya's knee, and Arya felt wetness there. Tears. The Velakir cubs cried when their pack was hurt. God, she hadn't wanted this. 6 months ago, when Arya had signed on as the sole human aboard the Wandering Star, she'd been warned about the Velakir. Pack species, the recruiter had said. Extremely loyal. Protective to the point of violence. And their young imprint fast. What the recruiter hadn't mentioned was how completely and utterly the cubs would claim her. It had started small. Kiro following her on her rounds through the ship. Then his siblings joining in, a tumbling mass of fur and curiosity. Then the whole pack, 15 cubs in total, orphaned from a colony raid, and being transported to a safe haven, deciding that Arya Ven, human engineer, was theirs. They slept outside her door. They brought her pieces of their rations. They growled at anyone who raised their voice near her, and now, as she'd feared, they discovered what she'd been trying to hide. The medical team already treated it, Arya said softly, placing her unbandaged hand on Kiro's head. His fur was silk soft, warmer than it should be. "I'll be healed in 3 days. You know how humans regenerate. Slowly," Kiro interrupted, and the word was both accusation and anguish. "Humans heal slowly. And poorly. You don't have redundant systems. You don't have adaptive cellular matrices. You're fragile. We prefer resilient," Arya said with a slight smile. But Kiro wasn't having it. He pulled back, and the bioluminescent patterns along his spine flared brilliant red, the color of challenge, of war. "Who was with you in the cargo bay?" Arya's smile faded. "Kiro." "Who?" The other cubs took up the chorus, a dozen young voices demanding justice. It was an accident, Arya repeated firmly. The Kethrian crew member who was supposed to check the storage seals forgot. That's all. They feel terrible about it. Forgot. Kiro's ears flattened against his skull. Forgot, and you bled. Forgot, and your flesh burned. Yes. The cubs exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them faster than Arya could follow. Then, as one, they turned and began moving toward the door. Oh no, you don't. Arya shot to her feet, ignoring the spike of pain from her arms. No hunting down crew members. No, defending my honor. No biting anyone. Kiro turned back, and for a moment, Arya saw not a cub but the warrior he would become, fierce, uncompromising, absolutely certain of his purpose. You are Pack, he said simply. Pack protects Pack. You protected us. Now we protect you. I'm not Pack, Arya said gently. I'm human. I'm your temporary guardian. Until we reach New Valar. That's all. The cubs stared at her. Syrah's luminescence had turned a heartbroken blue. Kiro approached slowly, deliberately. He sat at Arya's feet and looked up at her with eyes far too old for his young face. You sat with Mira when she had night terrors about the raid. You taught Jek to read Galactic Standard because he was too proud to ask the teachers. You give us extra rations from your own portions. You sang us human lullabies when we couldn't sleep. That's just being decent. You threw yourself on top of us when the ship was attacked last month. Kiro's voice was quiet now, but no less intense. The hull breach in Corridor 7. You grabbed as many of us as you could and covered us with your own body. We felt your bones crack from the pressure differential. Arya had no answer for that. You are human, Kiro continued, which means you are weak and fragile, and you heal too slowly, and you have only one heart and one liver, and you can barely smell and you can't see in 3 spectrums, and you have no venom and no claws and no armor. The cubs around him chittered agreement, a symphony of insults that somehow felt like love. But you are also human, Kiro said, and his bioluminescence shifted to brilliant gold, the color of Pack Bond, of acceptance, of forever. Which means you are brave and stubborn, and you protect those weaker than yourself, and you endure, and you choose who to love, instead of following instinct. And you chose us. Arya felt her throat tighten. Kiro, so we choose you. He pressed his snout against her bandaged wrist, infinitely gentle now. Pack protects Pack. Always. Whether you accept it or not. The other cubs moved in, a living blanket of warmth and fur and fierce, unshakable loyalty. Arya sank down among them, her arms aching, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name. I'm going to be fine, she whispered. We know, Kiro said, settling against her side. Because we'll make sure of it. And as the cubs purred around her, their bioluminescence painting the corridor in warm golds and gentle greens, Arya Ven understood what the recruiter had really meant. The Velakir young didn't just imprint. They claimed, and once claimed, a human became something more than they'd ever been alone. They became Pack.
Nobody tells you that first contact might happen because you spilled coffee on a transmission console. The hot liquid, synthetic blend, station grade, terrible, had arced beautifully through the low-gravity section of research platform Helix 9 before finding the one panel that controlled our deep space communication array. Sparks erupted, alarms sang their digital panic, and somewhere in the black between stars, my garbled distress signal apparently sounded enough like a formal greeting that the Nocturne Empire decided to respond. I was still swearing and grabbing fire suppressant when Lieutenant Hayes burst through the door, her gray hair escaping its usual tight bun. "What did you do, Reeves?" Contacted an alien civilization? I offered, watching error messages cascade across every screen like a very technical waterfall of my failures. She stared at me, then at the console, then back at me with an expression that somehow combined disbelief, resignation, and the exhausted patience of someone who'd been stationed too long at humanity's loneliest outpost. You're joking. The computer says we've received coordinates and a diplomatic acceptance code. I pointed at the one screen still functioning. From the Nocturne Empire, which according to our databases is vampires, Hayes finished flatly, space vampires. You invited space vampires to our research station by dumping coffee into sensitive military equipment. They prefer hemophagic nobility, according to the cultural brief. I was already pulling up files, my hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, from excitement. 3 years studying dead languages from civilizations that had gone silent centuries ago, and now something living was actually talking back. And technically, I didn't invite them. I just accidentally said hello, very loudly, across several star systems. Hayes pressed both palms against her temples. The nearest military support is 6 weeks away. Yes, but think about it. This is incredible. The Nocturne Empire has refused all contact for 200 years. They're a complete mystery. Some xenologists think they're just legends, ghost stories traders made up to explain missing colony ships. And now they're coming here because you can't drink coffee like a normal person. She exhaled slowly. When? I checked the timestamp on the transmission, felt my stomach drop. Approximately 17 hours ago, which means given their reported engine capabilities and accounting for dimensional drift through the Caecilian corridor, the station shuddered, not violently, but with the distinctive magnetic pulse that meant something large had just matched our velocity. Through the reinforced window, space twisted like dark water, and then a ship emerged. It didn't look like the vessels in our tactical databases. Those were all sharp angles and aggressive geometry, designed to intimidate. This was different, smooth as polished obsidian, curved like something grown rather than built, and absolutely massive. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns that almost looked like breathing. Oh, Hayes said very quietly. Oh, that's not good. That's magnificent, I breathed. Look at the hull design. Those aren't just lights. Those are bioluminescent communication nodes. They're talking to each other. The ship is alive, or at least partially organic. It means, Hayes said, that we're about to have very powerful visitors, and our only diplomat is the idiot who invited them by accident. She straightened her uniform with sharp movements. Get cleaned up. Find something that looks official. Try not to cause an interstellar incident. The docking process took an hour. Their ship seemed to be scanning us, though our sensors couldn't determine what kind of scan. Hayes insisted on meeting them at the airlock. I insisted on coming with her. We compromised by both going, heavily armed security flanking us. Everyone pretending we weren't terrified. The airlock cycled. Pressure equalized. The door opened with a hiss that sounded far too much like a sigh. They came through like figures from a dream. Tall, elegant, wrapped in dark fabric that seemed to shift in ways that had nothing to do with air currents. 4 of them, moving with synchronized grace. But it was the one in front who made me forget how to breathe properly. She wore a hood that shadowed her face. And even in the harsh utility lighting of our station, she seemed to carry darkness with her, like a personal atmosphere. When she moved, I caught glimpses of markings beneath the hood, lines that glowed faintly, tracing patterns across skin that was almost but not quite human pale. I am Velasira, she said, and her voice had layers to it, harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a single throat. Queen of the Nocturne Empire, keeper of the long dark, guardian of the crimson threshold. She paused, tilted her hooded head slightly. Did you truly contact us by accident? Hayes shot me a look that promised future consequences. I stepped forward. Yes, I'm Reeves, Dr. Jamie Reeves. I spilled coffee on the communications console. I'm very sorry. Also, welcome to Research Platform Helix 9, and I have so many questions about your language structure. Silence, the kind that stretches. Then from beneath the hood, I heard something impossible. She laughed, not sinister or cruel, but genuine amusement, surprised and light. You summoned the Nocturne Empire with coffee? Very bad coffee, I confirmed. Station grade. It's terrible. Would you like some? The conference room wasn't designed for royalty. It was designed for efficiency, which meant uncomfortable chairs, flickering fluorescent panels that hummed like dying insects, and a table that had seen better decades. Queen Velicera stood at the window instead, her back to us, hood still raised. Her 3 attendants had positioned themselves at equal points around the room's perimeter, like very elegant security sensors. Hayes had left me alone with them, actually alone. Her exact words had been, "You broke it, you fix it," before disappearing to update Earth Command on our situation, which meant I was now humanity's sole representative in what could either be historic diplomacy or a spectacular prelude to my own death. "So," I said, because silence felt worse than potential stupidity, "the coffee offer still stands. We also have nutrition paste in 17 flavors, though I'm legally required to tell you that 3 of them are actually the same flavor with different food coloring." One of the attendants made a sound. It might have been a cough. It might have been suppressed laughter. Hard to tell when everyone kept their hoods up like we were having a very formal Halloween party in space. Velicera turned slightly. The movement was unnaturally smooth, like watching water flow uphill. "Your station has been monitoring our border space for 3 years, Dr. Reeves. Your energy signatures were quite obvious. Why pretend the contact was accidental?" My mouth went dry. Because it actually was accidental. We weren't monitoring you specifically. We're a research platform. We study dead signals from extinct civilizations. You've been silent for 2 centuries. Everyone assumed you were either gone or not interested in talking. We had no idea our proximity sensors even reached your territory until, well, the coffee incident. "You study the dead," she said. It wasn't a question. "Languages, mostly. Cultural transmissions. Last messages. That sort of thing." I pulled up my tablet, showing her the waveform analysis I'd been working on before my beverage betrayed me. "This is from a civilization that went silent 400 years ago. They were trying to say something important, but the signal degraded. I've been trying to reconstruct it for 8 months." She moved closer, fast. One moment she was across the room, the next she was beside me, and I definitely didn't see the transition. Her hood shifted as she studied the screen, and I caught a glimpse of her profile, sharp, elegant, and marked with those glowing lines that branched like luminescent rivers across her cheek. The patterns pulsed gently, synchronized with something. Her heartbeat, maybe. "This is Caecilian script," she said. "Very old. They weren't saying something important. They were singing." "Singing?" "A death song. For their son." Her finger traced the waveform without touching the screen. "It translates roughly to 'We fade as all light fades, grateful for the burning.' You've been treating it as a distress call." I stared at the data I'd been parsing for months. She was right. The mathematical patterns that I'd interpreted as urgent repetition were actually melodic structure. "How do you know Caecilian?" "We knew them, before they faded." She pulled back, and the hood fell deeper over her face again. "We know many dead languages, Dr. Reeves. When you live as long as we do, everything becomes a dead language eventually." "How long do you live?" "Long enough to watch stars change color. Long enough to forget what it felt like to be young." She moved back to the window. "Your Hayes doesn't trust us. She's correct not to. Do you know what your people call us?" "Vampires. But that's just because of the..." I gestured vaguely at my own neck. "The hemophagy, yes. We require iron-rich compounds from living sources to survive. Your species produces excellent iron-rich compounds, which makes you either a resource or a temptation, depending on one's level of self-control." She said it matter-of-factly, like discussing weather. "I assume your security teams have been briefed to carry resonance weapons?" "Sonic disruptors, actually. They were on sale." That sound again from one of the attendants. Definitely suppressed laughter this time. "You're taking this quite well," Velicera observed. "Most humans panic when they realize we're apex predators and they're potentially prey." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm also fascinated. Your vocal harmonics alone suggest a completely different evolution of communication structures. And you just solved a puzzle I've been working on for months in about 15 seconds. So my scientific curiosity is currently overriding my survival instincts. which my ex-girlfriend always said was my most annoying quality. You had a girlfriend? Had being the operative word. She got tired of me prioritizing dead alien languages over date night. In my defense, the dead aliens never complained about my scheduling. I pulled up another file. Since you're here and apparently fluent in extinct tongues, can I show you something else? There's this signal from the Vorchek cluster that I think might be mathematical poetry, but I can't figure out the base counting system they used. Velasira tilted her head. The gesture reminded me of a bird studying something unexpected. You're asking me for academic assistance. You're literally the most qualified xenolinguist who's ever been on this station. Possibly the most qualified in the galaxy, given the whole living long enough to meet civilizations before they died thing. It would be criminal not to ask. I paused. Also, I'm hoping that if I'm useful to you, you'll be less likely to eat me. We don't eat people, Dr. Reeves. We're not animals. Right. Sorry, less likely to drink me? That's still eating, technically. I'm trying here. She laughed again. Properly this time, not hidden or suppressed. The sound had those same harmonics as her speaking voice. Layered and strange and somehow warm. Show me your Vorchek signal. If I help you solve it, will you explain why your coffee was terrible enough to damage military equipment? Deal. Though I warn you, the coffee explanation is less interesting than you'd hope. It mostly involves budget cuts and questionable supply chains. 3 hours later, we'd solved the Vorchek signal. Turned out they counted in base 7 because they had 7 moons and were very literal thinkers. And I'd somehow ended up teaching an immortal vampire queen how to use our catastrophically outdated database system. No, you have to hit enter twice. I don't know why twice. The programmer who designed this retired before I was born, and apparently took all logic with him. I leaned over her shoulder, pointing at the screen. She'd pushed her hood back at some point, focused on the work, and I was trying very hard not to stare at the bioluminescent patterns that traced across her temples and down her neck. They pulsed faster when she was concentrating. There, see? Now it'll cross-reference with the linguistic database. This system is older than some of my grandnieces, Velasira said. How does your species accomplish anything with technology this primitive? Stubbornness, mostly. Also coffee, though we've established I'm bad at that. I pulled up another file. Wait until you see our data storage solution. We're still using physical backup drives that require manual rotation every 72 hours. Manual rotation. Hayes does it. She's very responsible, unlike some people. I glanced at one of the attendants, who'd been standing motionless for 3 hours. Do they need to sit? Are they okay? I feel bad that we only have 4 chairs. They're fine. They're guards, not guests. They're still people. Or, well, I assume? I don't actually know your species' proper terminology. People? Beings? Individuals? I grabbed 2 chairs from the corner. Here, please sit. This is making me anxious. The guards looked at their queen. She made a small gesture. They sat, moving with synchronized precision that suggested either telepathy or really good training. One of them nodded at me. I nodded back. It felt like progress. You're very strange for a human, Velasira said. I get that a lot. Usually right before I get reassigned to remote research platforms in the middle of nowhere. I brought up the next signal in my queue, a fragmented transmission from somewhere in the outer reaches. Oh, this one's interesting. It's been repeating for 60 years, but the content changes slightly each cycle. Like it's evolving, or degrading. I can't tell which. She studied it, and her luminescent marks flickered in a pattern I was starting to recognize as curiosity. Play it. I triggered the audio reconstruction. The sound that filled the room was haunting, musical and mathematical at once, rising and falling in waves that felt almost like breathing. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. The other reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Stop, Velasira said quietly. Stop the playback. I stopped it. What's wrong? That's not a dead language. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. That's a distress call, an active one, from the Pale Reaches. The Pale Reaches are empty space. Nothing's lived there for 80 years, since the burning quartz fell. Her marks were pulsing rapidly now, bright enough to cast shadows. Someone survived. Someone's been calling for help for 60 years, and your species has been cataloging it as archaeological data. The weight of that hit me like physical force. 60 years. 60 years of someone screaming into the void while we filed their screams under interesting cultural artifacts. Can you translate it? It's ancient nocturne dialect. Pre-empire, it says... She stopped, her expression shifting to something I couldn't read. It says, "The garden is dying, the children are alone. Please remember us." Silence filled the room, the kind that has weight. "We have to tell someone," I said. "We have to send help." "Dr. Reeves, the pale reaches are 40 light years from here, through unstable space. Nothing human-made could survive the journey. And even our ships would take," she calculated, 3 months minimum. "So we do nothing? Let them keep broadcasting while we sit here solving linguistic puzzles?" I didn't say that. She turned to her guards, speaking in that layered harmonic language that my translator couldn't parse. They responded, rapid and urgent. She switched back to English. "We'll investigate. My ship can make the journey, but I need detailed coordinates, everything your database has on spatial anomalies in that region, and someone who understands your species' stellar cartography." "I understand stellar cartography. You're volunteering to board a nocturne vessel and travel into dead space to answer a distress call that might be a trap? You think it's a trap? I think 60 years is a long time to wait for rescue, long enough for hope to turn into other things, darker things." Her eyes met mine, and they were indeed crimson, bright and strange and completely focused. "I think anyone who survived the burning courts learned very effective ways to hurt people. And I think bringing a human into that situation is dangerous for everyone involved." "But you're going anyway." "I have to. Those are my people's words. That's my responsibility. Then it's mine too. I'm the one who cataloged it as dead. I'm the one who didn't realize someone was screaming. I saved all the relevant files to a portable drive. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't break our database system. You still haven't figured out the double enter thing." One of the guards made that almost laugh sound again. Velasera looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled and I saw her teeth. Sharp, yes, but the smile itself was warm. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Dr. Reeves." My ex-girlfriend said both, usually in the same sentence. I handed her the data drive. "When do we leave?" "As soon as you inform Hayes that you're departing on a potentially suicidal rescue mission with aliens your species barely trusts." "Right. That conversation will go well. I'll come with you. Moral support. You're the reason the conversation will go badly." "Exactly. Moral support for me." She gestured toward the door. "After you, Dr. Reeves." Hayes listened to my explanation with the expression of someone watching a slow-motion shuttle crash. When I finished, she put both hands flat on her desk and counted backward from 10 in 3 different languages. I recognized 2 of them. The third sounded Martian, which meant she was really upset. "Let me clarify," she said with dangerous calm. "You want to leave this station, board an alien vessel, travel through uncharted space to answer a distress call that's been active since before you were born, accompanied by a species we know almost nothing about except that they drink blood and could probably kill everyone on this platform before breakfast. Technically, hemophages require iron compounds, not specifically blood," I offered, "and it would be more of a brunch timeline, given the preparation involved." Velasera, standing beside me in Hayes' cramped office, made a sound that might have been amusement. Hayes glared at her, then at me, then back at her. "This isn't funny, Reeves." "I know. That's why I'm joking. If I stop joking, I'll remember that I'm terrified and volunteering anyway." I pulled up the signal analysis on Hayes' console. "Someone's alive out there. Someone's been calling for 60 years. We can't just ignore it." "Yes, we can. That's exactly what we can do. We're a research station, not a rescue operation. We have 12 people, outdated weapons, and a communications array held together with literal coffee stains." Hayes stood, pacing the narrow space between her desk and the wall. "Earth Command won't authorize this. They'll want to send a proper military escort, which will take months to organize. By which time, whoever's broadcasting might be dead," Velasera said. Her voice had lost its earlier warmth. "Lieutenant Hayes, I understand your caution, but those are my people calling. I cannot ignore them, and your Dr. Reeves has information I need to navigate safely." I'm asking permission, not because I require it legally, but because I respect your authority here. Hayes, stop pacing. You're asking permission to take one of my researchers into potentially hostile territory. Yes, and if I say no, then I take my ship and go alone, without proper coordinates, and probably die in an unstable spatial rift before I reach the Pale Reaches. Which would be unfortunate, because I was starting to enjoy your station's terrible coffee. Velasira tilted her head. Also, Dr. Reeves would feel guilty forever, and based on the last 3 hours, guilt makes them extremely talkative. You'd have to deal with that. I'm right here, I protested. I know. You're contributing to my point. Hayes sat down again, rubbing her temples. If you die out there, Earth Command will blame me. If you start an intergalactic incident, they'll blame me. If you successfully rescue survivors and it turns into a political nightmare, they'll definitely blame me. So you're saying yes? I asked hopefully. I'm saying I wanted in writing that this was Reeves's idea, signed by both of you, with timestamps and video evidence. She pulled up a formal documentation template. I want a communication check-in every 12 hours. I want full sensor logs. And I want you back here in one piece within 3 weeks, or I'm reporting you as killed in action and claiming your quarters for storage space. You can't claim my quarters. Watch me. I've been eyeing that shelf space for months. She pushed the documentation across the desk. Sign, both of you. And Reeves, if you get yourself eaten. Drunk, Velasira corrected. Eating implies consumption of solid matter. If you get yourself drunk by aliens, I'm telling your mother it was your fault. That's cruel and unusual punishment. I signed the form. My mother still hasn't forgiven me for the incident with the Martian ambassador. You told the Martian ambassador his ceremonial robes looked like expensive curtains. They did look like expensive curtains. Very nice curtains. It was a compliment. Velasira signed below my signature, her handwriting flowing in curves that didn't match any human script. I promised to return Dr. Reeves intact, Lieutenant Hayes. Mostly intact. At least 70% intact. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be, but I am serious about the rescue mission. Velasira's marks pulsed slowly, steady as a heartbeat. Those people have been alone for 60 years. I need to try. Hayes looked at her for a long moment. You really care about them, even though you don't know who they are. They spoke in old dialect, pre-Empire. That means they're from before the wars, before we became what we are now. They might be the last connection to who we were. She paused. Wouldn't you travel into danger for that? I traveled into danger for a pension and dental coverage, Hayes said dryly. But yes, I understand. She stood extending her hand. Bring them back. Bring yourself back. And for the love of all that's holy, bring Reeves back before they accidentally start another diplomatic incident. Velasira shook her hand. The gesture looked awkward on both of them, like neither species had quite figured out the mechanics of formal greeting. I'll do my best, though I make no promises about the diplomatic incidents. Your Dr. Reeves seems to generate them naturally. It's a gift, I said. It's a curse, Hayes corrected. She turned to me. Pack light. Bring your translation equipment. Don't touch anything that looks important on their ship. And Reeves? Yes? Try not to die. The paperwork would be excessive. I'll add it to my list of motivations. Right below scientific curiosity and crushing guilt about the distress signal. Perfect. Now get out of my office before I change my mind. We left. Velasira's guards fell into step behind us as we walked toward the docking bay. The station felt different now, smaller somehow, like I was seeing it from outside already. In 18 hours, I'd be on an alien ship, traveling through space that might kill us, looking for people who might not want to be found. Are you scared? Velasira asked quietly. Absolutely terrified. You? Yes, but I'm glad I won't be alone. We reached the airlock. Her ship waited beyond it, dark and alive and strange. I took a breath. Let's go save some people. The Nocturne ship interior was nothing like I'd expected. Where I'd imagined cold metal and clinical efficiency, there were curved walls that seemed to breathe, bioluminescent panels that shifted colors based on who stood near them, and what I could only describe as a garden growing along the ceiling. Actual plants reaching down like they'd forgotten which way gravity worked. It's alive, I said, touching a wall that felt warm under my palm. Partially. We grow our ships over decades. They become part of us. Velasira moved through the corridors with easy familiarity, her guards dispersing to other sections. Your quarters are here. We'll reach the Pale Reaches in 2 days if the dimensional currents cooperate. The room she showed me was small but comfortable, with a window that displayed space in ways I'd never seen. Stars didn't just shine, they sang, visible wavelengths shifting into audible frequencies. I stood there, watching colors become sound, and felt very far from home. It's beautiful, I said. It's lonely. Velasira stood beside me at the window.
Jebene
She lowered
debilčine,
her
niko
hood
nije
completely
odšao po
now,
sredini da
and I could see
spota.
the
Ne,
full
ne, ne,
pattern
ne,
of
zašto
the
bi to
marks.
radio?
They traced from her temples down her neck, disappearing beneath her collar.